guys, welcome to the shop. This week we're going to be pulling the motor off this little 105 SX KTM and doing the top end on it. Now you don't have to pull the motor in order to do this job, but I want to pull the motor so I can clean and inspect everything as we do and make sure everything's in good shape. So let's get started tearing this thing down. So this little bike needs a seat cover and several other things, but those are all cosmetic really. You can wait. We want to get this bike in good mechanical condition. It's nice and reliable. Four subframe bolts, 1, 2, and on the other side. Loosen the intake boot on the carburetor. And the subframe, the whole rear of this bike comes off. It's really that easy. We loosen our coolant system vent bolt. Pull out our water pump drain. Let this thing drain while pull the pipes and stuff off of it. So I'm going to want to check these reed valves for damage also. I'll do that once I get this motor on the bench. Just a lot easier to work on. You don't have to work on your knees, and it will allow me to clean everything that I couldn't get otherwise, because it was covered by other components or whatnot. Don't want any thing falling down in there. Probably took 15-20 minutes. Alright, so we got about everything we need here to do the top end build on this little motor. Got a new 52mm stock size Wiseco piston. We got a new wrist pin bearing and wrist pin. New compression ring. It's only a 1-ring piston. We've got new circlips. We've got a complete head gasket set, minus the little copper washers on the actual head itself, which I'm not too happy about, but we should be able to reuse those. This also comes with a power valve and reed cage seal. We've got some extra jets. These are not the ones that I need to get this bike back in running condition for our current conditions, but for colder weather, I've got some more on the way. They're only a couple bucks a piece, so worth the investment. Got a new spark plug boot, just because it's not a bad idea. Got a timing tool. This sets our jug height or our squish or compression. It sets our ignition timing, and it sets our power valve timing. So that is a really nice tool to have, especially for this little motor. And I've got 3 different sets, plus this one, or 3 different thickness jug gaskets, 0.2 millimeter, 0.3 millimeter, and 0.5 millimeter. So think that I'm good to go. So these are little copper washers I was talking about that the gasket set did not come with. It really should have come with those, in my opinion. I like the idea of reusing them, but probably be fine. So this little head here just seals with O-rings. Not too bad. And let me get you a shot in here. Alright, so here's a look inside the cylinder. Looks pretty good. You can see where the ring gap runs, but it's non-detectable by feel. And the exhaust side of the cylinder looks as good as the rest. It's not a new cylinder, but definitely I think a serviceable one. And we'll just scuff that up. I believe this is Nick Seal coated, just a hard coating like you would have on machine tools. That's what I believe anyway. And actually, it looks better than I would have guessed. So pretty happy about that. It should clean up fine and last for quite a while if it's not, you know, ran too lean. So usually when a two-stroke goes out, they usually go out on or drops the cylinder. They do it on the exhaust side, and this one looks pretty good. So it's never had any long-term lean conditions. Doesn't appear to anyway. So our power valve actuating arm cover. Little flap there raising up, just raises that exhaust port. And all that does is change the exhaust port timing, as far as I've read. And man, when this thing kicks on, that little bike wakes up for sure. Power valve and cover. Jug and piston.
Two grains. It's 2 grains in a wheel.
How far are we spacing them?
Just a small step.
Okay.
Like there.
That's okay, about 16 inches or so.
Yeah.
And both of these are the same?
Yeah, just finish it the same. Ground a little bit cloddy. It was real bad before I done the road tiller on it.
Yeah. Yeah, bad crust on it.
Yeah.
Don't look bad now though.
Really, that's about all it is. That's what we're doing.
Pretty basic.
Get the little seeds in the ground. They can do their thing.
Yep. Alright, so here's the part that I really enjoy, and the cylinder cleaned up really good. It's so hard to show, but all I did was, this being a coated cylinder, it says not to use a ball hone. It says you can use a rigid hone on it. All I did, take a little Scotch-Brite, gray Scotch-Brite, just ever so lightly at a 45-degree angle, and then switch to the other way to put just to break that glaze. That's all I wanted to do. This cylinder looks, you know, it's not new, of course, it's a 10-year-old bike, but it looks pretty good. And checking my end ring gap, you can see I've got my piston ring stuck square down in the cylinder. Just use the piston to push it down in there, and took my filler gauges to check the piston end ring gap. And for this piston, it says it should be about 4 thousandths per inch of cylinder. Well, this is a little over 2 inches. It's not much over 2 inches. It's 52 millimeters. And I can get a 10 thousandths feeler gauge down in my ring gap fairly easily. And I can squeeze an 11 thousandths down in there. So, you know, it's a little larger, but better, I guess, to be on the large side than on the small size. It says 3 or 4 thousandths per inch of cylinder is common. So we're at about 10.5 thou on a ring gap. And I'm measuring my bore with my Starrett small or snap gauges, just to make sure that this bore, I've checked it in several spots. It is basically right on the money at 52 millimeters. So the bore is good. It's kind of hard to do on camera. We're just checking it, and everything's looking good so far. So just cleaned it up a bit, and getting it ready to be put back in service. So I'm just cleaning up my old surfaces here. My jug surface on my 2 halves of my case. The piston in this thing, it was due for replacement. It's got some uneven wear, but I did notice that we have a large hump at our transition here, where our 2 halves of our cases come together, and you're asking for an air leak at a point like that. The back is really good, but the front got a noticeable hump there. And you know, if the gasket doesn't make up that transition, then you'll suck air here. You do not want to suck air with a 2-cycle. So I have not done a leak down test on this, but I plan to. I probably won't do that on camera, but you know, you pump air into, after you get everything together, you pump air into either the intake or the exhaust port with a pressure gauge check to make sure the case holds pressure, because otherwise this thing will suck air, you'll run lean, and you'll burn up your cylinder. And you know, it happens all the time. You know, people run these 2 cycles when they're not running good, and they pay for it big time. So there you go. We'll get a look at this ring. It looks like it's got some uneven wear on it, and get this old piston off. Let's pull our ring off. We're just going to roll it off. It doesn't look, well, yeah, it does actually look bad. It's got I can see it visually that it's got a thin section here. So this was definitely overdue for, you know, replacement. We'll run some calipers around through here and check that. But yeah, that's all that really builds your compression right there. And if that's not good, then you know, it's not good. Okay, so I just done a quick comparison of the new ring versus the old ring. I wrote down the measurements of the old ring, which is considerably worn all the way around, and in its thinnest area is around 72 thousandths of an inch, or 1.96 millimeter. The new ring itself is 2.22 millimeter, or 87.5 thousandths. So considerably worn all the way around and definitely due for replacement. So 1.99 millimeter, 1.96, 1.97, I mean, you get the idea. 1.94, just inconsistent and worn. Definitely due for replacement. And you know, if you ran that too much longer, you'd run into trouble. That's why you want to do the top ends on 2 cycles pretty often. Alright, so we've been pulling off the old piston and stuff. I wanted to check the old components just out of curiosity, really. And this is the wrist pin out of the old piston. And I'm just miking it to see what kind of wear I have. And I'm getting about 2/10 of wear, just normal wear really, on the wrist pin, but it also due for replacement. And so we'll get a new pin and a new bearing with that new piston. It was definitely due. Alright, so up to this point everything's been pretty basic. Really just cleaning stuff. I did put a couple new O-rings in the power valve and washed this jug out with warm soapy water just to make sure I get all any grit or anything out of it. And I need to install this piston. Of course, it has an arrow that points towards the exhaust port. Here is the piston ring, and it has to go on a little pin. There is no direction on this ring up or down, although it does have a little N stamped on it. I'm going to put that up. It says this in the paperwork. Some rings will require them to be put on, you know, at a certain direction. So I'm just going to try to roll this in. So I have a ring expander, but I always like rolling them on better, as long as I don't scratch the top of the piston. Should be okay. Just like that. And then it's got a little pin here that wrap, or that the gap of the ring rides in. So there we go. Alright, so I'm just using a little bit of 2-cycle oil, raw 2-cycle oil, to lube my new bearing here. And install this new piston and wrist pin. Same way. And this will be the most time-consuming part of the job. Not installing this piston, but setting my deck height. I'll be using different gaskets for that. So let me install this, and then we will move on to that. I'll explain it a little more. So this last clip is always such a pain to get in, and that is why you put a rag in your crankcase. You will lose it in there. There we go. Make sure it's back and seated. And that sounds good. And it's facing, yeah, should be good. You don't want the centrifugal force, I guess, the reciprocating motion to throw your pin out. So it helps to put them in, you know, with a gap either up or down, I think. So there we go. Alright, so we need to make sure that our piston ring gap is on a pin. Starting out with the factory gasket, thickness of 0.5 millimeter. Alright, so let me show you how this tool works. And basically we have a flat surface with a dip in it, and that is for setting our deck height, what I'm trying to adjust right now. So we bring the piston to the top dead center, and we don't want it to lift this tool off of the top of the cylinder. So right now it definitely is, so I'm going to have to add another gasket. Next we have this small section here, which actually goes down inside the cylinder, and that is for setting. You have to make sure you're in the center of the cylinder. You bring the piston up till it touches the tool, just till it touches the tool, and then you set your timing marks on your ignition. So it's a multi-function tool. It's pretty neat, really. It's like 17 bucks, a little pricey for a piece of stamped sheet metal, but you know, I'd like to come up with something like that for that kind of price. And then it has a gap here, which is used to set the power valve on the engine to get it into adjustment. So pretty neat little tool. It's definitely worth the money, in my opinion, to get it set up, if nothing else, just for the timing feature, so you don't have to mess around with it. You know, you just use this tool, set it up, get you right in the ballpark right off the bat. So I'm going to be adding a base gasket to this. I'll torque these down again and recheck until I get within the range of this tool. That's the idea. Alright, so I'm pretty much done. It took a combination of a 50mm gasket and a 30mm gasket to get me right at as close as I can be to agreeing with this tool. I do lift this tool just a little, but I think I'm going to have to live with that. I don't have a combination of gasket that would get it any better than it is, so it's close enough. And our power valve, basically just adjust with this one little tab here. You just loosen the bolt, move the tab. This is just sets its starting position, and it is right on the money. So there we go. Now it's time to put the cylinder head on this thing. Our crazy little O-ring, and button this guy up. So I've got a large reactor tube here. I'm going to weld this end on to the tube. It was already on there. I had to shorten this whole piece of tube about 3 inches. So I need to weld this back on, and it's got to be straight. This gets inserted into another pipe. These are the standoff fingers that hold it true in the bore. And then another piece of pipe gets inserted into this one. So everything needs to line up. I've already tacked this thing once. I was really unhappy with the way that it was lining up, or at least that I could just do it freehand. And I don't have any rollers or anything, not here. So what I'm going to have to do, I think, is take these pieces of angle iron and these band clamps, strap these angle iron to the pipe, and use that. I'm going to have 3 of them to hold everything square while I tack. That's the idea anyway. I think that's probably my best bet to getting this thing on there straight as it needs to be with the tools that I have. I think that'll work. This is set up so we're purging the back gas in. Get our cylinder for our welder, cylinder for the back gas. Our clamps are ready, and we're plugged on the end with some ceramic wool just to keep air from getting back up in there. So I'm ready to tack this in the 3 exposed spots, and hopefully it'll be straight when I take off its splints. So I'd call that done. It's not beautiful, but this doesn't have to be. It just needs to be strong. And I'll just dress that down and call that good. That angle iron to hold that straight worked pretty good. Hard to tell on camera, but it's good enough. And that's all I needed. Alright, so the little KTM's back together. The head work that I done on it turned out really good. We're running it a little rich right now. Still got a couple issues. It is still, of course, still running too rich for my liking, but I've got the jets and stuff, but better to run it rich, breaking it in, I assume. It's got a crack here where the bracket mounts to the frame, and she pukes a little bit, so I'm gonna have to cut these welds out and re-weld that. And a few other things, minor issues really, but starts and runs good, so he's enjoying it. Still got to get him some riding boots. We don't have those yet, but those are on the top of the list as far as safety goes. Got to get him some riding boots and some goggles, but he's got the most important part is the helmet. But, you know, really shouldn't skip on safety on these things. They are definitely dangerous, and this thing is a handful for its size, but he's handling it really good. So there you go. Nice little bike. Hi, Chloe. Guys, I think that's it. It's got some rain on the roof. It's supposed to rain for the next 5 or 6 days in a row, I think. And I'm glad I got the corn in the ground, you know, of course, with my family's help. Really glad to get my little guy's bike worked out, at least to a point to where he can ride it. He's definitely improved. Just, it's amazing to watch somebody go from, you know, feeling uncomfortable just sitting on the bike to riding and shifting gears and climbing small hills within a couple days. It feels good, I'll have to say. As a father, it feels great to watch him progress at the speed that he is. I still need to get him all his safety gear, you know, and all that stuff. But that, you know, that stuff costs money too, and it's on the list. It's next on the list. You know, we got the bike running at an acceptable point right now that he can ride it. So boots, goggles, you know, gear, and I think he'll be set. And one day we'll ride together, me and him. But that's going to be down the road. Got some machining that I want to do next week. Maybe a little welding, maybe some cutter grinder work, several things. Appreciate you watching, guys. Hope you know or that you enjoyed the little mix-up. You know, not so much machining this week, but just real life stuff. Got to get if I can't get my fella going, you know, then I'm not doing my job, and this is my job. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. All my viewers, patrons, and subscribers. You guys are awesome. If you need anything, contact me through my email. Click on the little guy to subscribe to the channel. As always, I'll see you next time.